Filling in for Midge Rapoli, I'm Mark Maxwell. An alarming trend spirals into a full-blown health scare, and now fears about the measles is starting to hit close to home for many people out on the West Coast. See, people are starting to report startling signs showing up in the store windows and at medical facilities all over town. These posted alerts asking people to remember if they might have been there in that building on a particular date and time. Those that answered yes were told the unfortunate and alarming news: they might have been exposed to the measles. There were even more cases confirmed in the recent outbreak again today. In Phoenix, health officials now believe nearly 1,000 people may have been exposed to the measles virus. That number multiplying from 200 at first estimate. Now, some children that have not been vaccinated are under a mandatory quarantine. Many parents outraged that in a doctor's office, of all places, their child was exposed to a potentially fatal disease. And health officials in Arizona believe this is hardly the end. They expect to see even more measles patients in the coming days, and they're preparing for the worst. Health officials working closely with the Super Bowl security to ensure that travelers don't get exposed and potentially carry that disease back to their hometowns. Now, there are 95 confirmed cases of measles in the U.S. in under 4 weeks, and that number continuing to grow. Federal health officials traced the outbreak originally back to Disneyland, of all places. Now, several people have returned home and spread it to others in their communities. Doctors warn measles is one of the most contagious viruses out there. Some health analysts believe that up to 9 out of every 10 people unvaccinated, if exposed to measles, could easily come down with the dangerous virus. But also other concerns, because several people already infected were in fact vaccinated and still came down with the virus. Now, those concerns are keeping dozens of California students home from school. Now, while they might not be complaining per se, their parents sure aren't happy. And it's all because those parents chose not to vaccinate their kids. A conscious decision now being punished. At Palm Desert High School, one school in the area there, sending 66 students home, being told not to return for nearly 2 weeks.
I think it's just a safety precaution for the kids who do, just in case they do get it. It's a good way to make sure everyone is safe and doesn't get hurt.
I do think it's important because they need to stay safe and healthy, so I do think it's good for them too.
Now, as you can imagine, this decision sparking a heap of controversy in those communities. Parents on both sides are outraged. Some feel their kids are the victims, being forced to miss nearly 2 weeks of class because of their own conscious health choices. Clearly, not everyone agrees on this. It's highly debatable. Other students say they feel safer, knowing that they won't have to walk the hallways with potentially exposed students.
They are going to be asked to stay home until the incubation period for contagion would be complete.
Now, this measles scare is reigniting a national conversation over whether or not vaccines are safe. Now, we know they've done a lot to eradicate deadly viruses over the years, those numbers plummeting, that's undeniable, but even the federal health experts admit there is always the risk of side effects and unwanted reactions. Of course, every human's body reacts a little bit different to injections, and it's impossible to predict how that might play out.
The ayes are 62, the nays are 36. Senate Bill 1, as amended, is passed.
Senate Bill 1, in case you didn't know, just so happens to be the Keystone XL pipeline bill. It's official. The House and Senate both sign off on the bill. Now it's headed to the president's desk. Now, even though the president has threatened to veto the bill, it does have strong support from both Republicans and Democrats. But even with some Democrats on board, this is one of the very first shows of strength from the right, and a stark reminder that the American people voted for a very Republican Congress. Now, earlier this year, President Obama tells House Democrats he's not going to be standing on the sidelines the last 2 years of his administration. He's going to play the offense, he says. Democrats now in retreat mode, though, talking strategy in Philadelphia. They say they're sticking with the same old agenda priorities the party has had for some time now: a higher minimum wage, tax hikes for the rich, and preserving Obamacare at all costs. Now, it's not entirely a foregone conclusion that this administration will, in fact, veto the Keystone bill. But if it does, GOP leaders say that will be a clear sign the president has no plans to work with Republicans or honor the voice of the Americans in last November's loud election. In other news, a rash of bomb threats against airlines has been popping up on Twitter a lot lately. Just this week, 2 jets landing in Seattle had to be evacuated. A third plane flying on its way to Orlando had to be diverted to Dallas. Now the feds ramping up their investigations. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, he says the government is working to identify the culprit or culprits. Officials say those responsible seem to be feeding off of all the publicity, and it will probably take an arrest and a serious charge against the suspect to stop this flood of threats. Now, after an FBI investigation, all of those Twitter accounts involved have now been suspended, so hopefully that stems the tide of the problem for a little bit. A lot of travel still taking place. Now, while federal officials continue their investigation, they do know enough to say that this is most likely the work of a prankster, not a terrorist. Now, in case you're wondering, it is still a federal crime, even if it's just a prank. It's a very serious crime at that. If caught and convicted, this kind of a crime could cost up to $250,000 and up to 5 years behind bars.
Tragedy strikes in Mexico as a gas explosion leaves at least 7 people dead. A maternity hospital in Mexico City is now destroyed after a leak from a gas truck ignited. These type of trucks are common in the city where gas lines are not part of the infrastructure. Gas supplies are shipped in trucks throughout the area. Rescuers were shocked to find multiple babies still alive, buried under metal and concrete.
We got 4 nurses and 2 babies out. There were 6 babies. There are 2 left. Unfortunately, they're focusing on the demolition and not to the rescue of survivors.
Since violent militants stormed a local school, killing over 130 people, teachers in Peshawar are on edge. Now they're taking their lives into their own hands. A Pakistani police constable is working with educators on how to arm themselves. During a 2-day training, teachers are taught how to handle a gun, along with how to shoot it. Police are offering the classes for any schools interested in firearm use. Not everyone is happy about the defensive tactics, though. The lessons have sparked some controversy in the area. Some parents say guns should not be allowed on school property, while others say it is important.
Nowadays, it has become very important. The training should be made compulsory now. In every institution, every organization, whether it is doctors, engineers, lawyers, journalists, this training is a must for everyone so that you can defend yourselves.
Walking under a ladder, breaking a mirror, whatever the case may have been, one Canadian man is having some pretty bad luck. Joel Ifergan bought 2 tickets for the weekly lottery draw for a $27 million jackpot. As Joel waited for the second ticket to print, the deadline passed. The winning numbers fell right into Joel's hand, but the ticket was time-stamped 7 seconds after the lottery time limit. After spending over $100,000 in court fees, he still has yet to collect any money. Both Quebec courts and Canada's highest court have thrown out the case. Joel blames his loss on slow Quebec lottery machines, but says he will continue to play.